Hello and welcome to another episode of Steel Fur Speaks with me, Steel Fur, post haircut Steel Fur, which is exciting for me, exciting for all of you. I've been able to go out to the shop and get my first haircut in almost 6 months. Super excited, and of course, the UK is opening up indoor dining next week, so I will be going to the restaurants. And in a month, I can actually sit down and play cards in person. I'm super excited. This episode is a bit of a news roundup, kind of a talk piece about what's currently happening with things in the Monarch world and Flesh and Blood, and kind of like maybe a few public safety announcements for people who are less sure about Monarch and all those kind of things, and what's going on with the market and what's going on with those kind of things. This will be my second market video in a row, which I don't like because I'm not really here to talk about finances. And, if I'm going to sit in my room and talk about cards, currently in my laundry room, if you could, see all the stuff scattered around. I've got loads of cardboard boxes behind me that were full of Monarch a minute ago. I've opened 8 boxes or so far. Some good hits. I can show them to you. In my shiny pile, we've got some Doomsdays, some more Doomsdays. We have some Hooves. And some more hooves. I've got more hooves in here somewhere, actually. And then we have, Galaxy Black, Ironhide Plate, Luminaris, Blood-Drop Brigade, my favourite, Phantasmal Footsteps, Eclipse, Luminar Ascension, and Halo of Illumination. This is just a random Reaping Blade that I'm keeping around because it's going to be good. But you can't know my address, and of course, these cold foils won't be here for much longer, so that's all right. But basically, I opened some boxes. The drop rate for legendaries seems to be a lot higher. It's about 3.5, so you're more likely to get 2 in a case than 1. I've seen 2 in a box. I've seen cold foil commons and legendaries in the same box. I've seen 2 fables in the same box. We've pretty much seen everything, which kind of brings me to my first public safety announcement, right? There are a lot of boxes being sold right now online at, we'll say, reasonably high prices. Prices have been dropping, which we'll talk about later. But first, I want to tackle the issue with the current price of boxes and the expected value of a box, right? The current price of boxes in the UK, around £330, £350. In the US, it's still about 400, I think, slightly hovering around that mark. Boxes are being bought at that price. They're going back up again. And if you, as a casual person, are thinking, well, every single post on this group is, I pulled a Fabled, I pulled a Legendary, I got a 2 Legendary box, I got a 3 Legend. Like, if every single post you see is that, I want you to stop, and because you're going to think, well, if I buy a box for 300, I'm obviously going to get my expected value back, right? Right, and that's what we want to talk about. Expected value of box versus pull rate from box. Because I've just held up a stack of cards, and I told you I only opened 8 boxes, and I've probably smashed my expected value, right? But I got lucky. I got very lucky, and I went to a pre-release, so I opened packs from 3 different boxes for 6, and that's where I got 2 of my legendaries. And, I opened boxes, 1 case, and then 3 random boxes, so I got lucky, because those boxes were from different cases, right? I have friends who've only pulled 4 Majestics and a cold foil common from a box. Does that pay the EV of the box? The Majestic prices are falling every day. I've seen some selling for £10 on eBay, £20 on eBay. The cold foil commons are, 100, 150, 200. Like, the values are dropping of those cards. So I want you to think that, the current value of a box at 300 does not necessarily mean you're going to get paid back. So once again, take yourself a step back from the confirmation bias you see on Facebook. Take yourself a step back from all of the amazing posts of people pulling amazing things. You could be that person. You could get that amazing box, but it's not guaranteed. Never spend money you don't have. Don't spend money you can't afford to spend speculating on card games. Because even if, it's important to look at volume here. Even if you do pull those cards that have the expected value, you have to ask how quickly you're going to be able to sell them, who's paying the prices, and also, are you going to be able to sell them for the market price if you need to sell them fast? So if I buy a box for 300 and I need 300 for my rent next week, even if I open up a card that market value is worth 800, I'm not going to be able to sell it for 800 that quickly, maybe. If I drop the price to 600, someone might snap it up. And then we start to get into the realms of gambling, need versus want in terms of returns. So, it is still very important to keep the old mantra. Buying boxes is gambling. There is no 2 ways about it. Expected value is an average function of what is contained in the box that is not the actual value that you may or may not get. We've seen boxes with one cold foil common and one majestic in, which is bad, but it does happen. If that happens to you and you are in a bad financial situation because of that, then you shouldn't have bought that box in the first place. So please do keep that in mind. It's kind of my first PSA post Monarch Week 1. Prices are kind of starting to stabilize, but they haven't started yet. Is do not buy boxes you cannot afford. And that's been true from before, but it's even truer now because people are, the prices seem like they're dropping and there's an opportunity to buy in, whereas before they were just very, very high and a lot of people were put off by a $600 box, $500 box and weren't going to buy in anyway. Whereas now with the prices dropping, there is that temptation to buy in. But just remember that expected value, is not guaranteed and you still have to sell the card. So that's important. I think let's talk about that. So let's move on there over to what is actually happening in the market, because you saw on day one, legendaries came out, people trying to buy them for $1,500, right? Yeah, $1,500. Now the price is $1,000. The price is basically being manipulated very simply by supply and demand. A lot of people who bought these case boxes not to play with the cards, but to get some money to pay for their unlimited, which is a lot of people, I know a lot of them have said it, are basically trying to sell the cards for whatever they can. They don't want to hold them for a long time. They probably don't have the financial situation to hold them for a long time. And they essentially just need to sell them. And that's what they're doing. So you kind of have to factor that in, that the prices now are entirely created by the fact that there is supply and demand problems. And there's just a lot more supply. There's a lot more people trying to sell than there are people trying to buy. But it's the people trying to buy bit that I actually want to spend a bit of time exploring, because we're in a very interesting situation with Monarch, right? Where, unlike the previous boxes of Fab, the at purchase price originally, because remember, Crew was available for a long time on shelves. I've been told, I started after the whole Crew thing, but people have told me that it was available for a long time on shelves before the game really started picking up steam for $100, right? So we have a lot of situations with Crucible where a lot of the money available for Crucible product became available after the fact. So after the box was purchased originally in the reseller market. And that meant that the money available for Crew purchases was coming from people who didn't have Crew, who needed the Crew cards, and hadn't spent any money on boxes, and therefore had a lot of mental and actual budget free. Mental budget's important. You have an idea of what your limit to spend on a game is and on a set is, and if you go over that, you're not willing to spend any more. It's just a fact. So a lot of people's mental and actual budgets were not expended on Crew because essentially they hadn't actually spent anything because they hadn't been able to buy boxes, or they bought boxes cheaply and they were just missing some cards. Now, what we've seen happening with Monarch is very interesting, right? So stores, especially in America, but also in the UK, push the price up on the boxes to what they should be at resale value approximately, a couple of weeks after the set comes out, right? Depending on how many boxes were out there. I actually think that if the boxes are sold at 100, they would be selling it maybe 200 now, right? Because there is a supply and demand issue. There's a lot of people who would have bought a lot more Monarch than they have because of the price. So it's not to say that there isn't a supply and demand issue and the price of Monarch shouldn't be higher. But let's just take this example specifically. So if stores sell at $100, right? And I buy a case or a couple of cases and you buy a couple of cases, right? But we've all only spent maybe like $1,000. Then what happens and turns around is that someone starts selling other cards that we don't have yet, but we've only spent $1,000. And we still have, say, okay, well, my budget for finishing off a Crucible cold foil set is 3,000, right? It's not actually. I'm not going to do that. But my point is, say it was. I've spent 1,000 buying boxes to try and open the cards I want. I then spend the other 2,000 buying singles on the open market, right? And that's kind of like a natural idea of how much I'm willing to spend, how much I've already spent, and the returns I expect to see on that. Okay. What's happened with Monarch, which is quite interesting, is that the stores put the prices up first. And the stores have pretty much, you look at the reseller market now with boxes going for $400, and you look at Channel Fireball and Rudy and all those people who sold boxes for $500, $600, and they still are. You have to say, well, anyone who bought from them trying to sell now is losing money, okay? And there's lots of people who would have bought from them who are either now holding the box in the hope the price will go up, or selling it as quickly as they can because they need to get that money out of the product and losing money, right? So very much like you'd see with a stock, if people have bought it at that inflated price, then they rely on the stock to go up in order to see a return, right? And it's not always the smartest idea. In fact, usually it's not the smart idea to get involved in a stock once it has already reached a very high level. So is it smart to buy, example, a Monarch First Edition box at $600 if you missed the window to get it at $100? I would have said not. In fact, I didn't do that. So, I would think that that's not a smart decision, because you rely on the EV of that box you buy either being so good that when you open it you get the return, or you rely on market dynamics of lots of people opening the boxes to push the price up higher. Now, I suspect that will happen. We've seen it happen. We don't know the size of the print run for Monarch yet, but I do suspect that it will happen. Lots of people are opening boxes. The EV of the boxes is still very high. So, I mean, to borrow terms from Alpha Investments, there is going to be a lot of arbitrage. It's not from him, but you know what I mean. Arbitrage on the boxes because the EV is so high. People will crack them to get the cards to sell. That's just how it works. The number of sealed boxes will diminish quite quickly. And then depending on the size of the print run, they could be worth more in the long term. But if you bought a box for 600 hoping for it to go up in the short term, you're screwed, and you shouldn't have done that. But that's the market we're in now. You've spent money you couldn't afford, and you kind of have to hold it. But it's kind of to tie these 2 points together: the idea of how much you're willing to spend on a set, and how much money is now available in the singles market for buying these cards at $100, $150 to $200 for a cold foil common, $800 for a legendary. I think it's 1-200 for an alt-art Galaxy cold foil or something. The prices are all over the shop. But my point is that how much money is actually available for the singles market right now is actually quite low because of what happened with the price of boxes, right? A lot of people have spent their budget on Monarch, whatever way they count their budget, on the actual boxes themselves, and therefore don't have as much money to buy singles. And that's why we're seeing such low volume of actual buys and the price of singles drop so much, right? Because that is what's happening. If you go on eBay, you'll see last week Legendaries listed £1,400. Now they're selling for $800. There's only been like 5 sold in the past 4 or 5 days. So people who would have purchased that cold foil legendary, guaranteed cold foil legendary, over buying a box, probably spent $200-300 on the box and haven't got the budget left to buy the specific card they were looking for. So if you're asking why the singles market is dropping so quickly, there are 2 main factors. The main factor, one, is supply. Everyone's opening their boxes. A lot of people bought first edition at whatever price they could get it, with a goal of funding their unlimited boxes, and they're selling. And that, coupled with the fact that there is actually, I would say, a low amount of capital currently available for the rest of, I don't know how long it's going to be like this, is that people just aren't willing to pay that price. They're not willing to pay the price that people initially were asking. People are valuing these legendaries. Essentially, and I don't want to, I'm not blaming stores for this. I've said many times I think stores deserve to get in on some of the resale profits. But when you pump it so high, you essentially create a situation where there is a vacuum of costs, where a lot of people have sunk a lot of money in and need to get it out, and a lot of other people have sunk a lot of money in and therefore don't have money to spend. And that kind of creates a wonderful, well, I won't call it a downward vortex, but it is a bit of a downward spiral where no one is buying because they spent all their money on boxes, and other people spend so much money on boxes that they have to sell. And that's why the prices have been changing so much. It will, take my word on this or not, it will balance out. It's just how it works. People will take cards, they'll put them in the collection, they'll sit on them. Money will become available. People will get paychecks and think, well, that cold foil legendary is still for sale, so maybe I'll just buy that now at $600. Let's just go and get it. And then the prices will start to increase as the supply falls off, and the same with sealed boxes. As the supply falls off, as more are opened, as the expected value drops, which it is doing right now, less people will be keen to open their boxes until it goes up, and therefore the expected value of the box will go up again. That is going to happen, but if you're dealing with this in the short term, then I'm really sorry for you. It should be something you keep in mind for the next set. If the stores pump their prices as high, is if you buy at that price, you need it to sell at that price, or you're taking a loss, and you may be setting yourself up for a situation where you have bought too high and you cannot sell. So don't do it. If you can't afford to wait through the rough patch where everyone's figuring out prices while boxes are being opened and trades are being made and stuff is selling really, really low, then don't put money on the table until you can. Because, like, for example, I will do this a bit, but I don't need the money back from those right now. I have my job. I do, I work for a living, and I can feed myself on that. And I had my budget for Monarch, and that's been spent. So I'm not buying cold foils, even though I've got some missing. I will either trade them like for like, the ones I've got. Like, I've got a Doomsday that I'm trying to trade for another legendary. I won't buy them. And there's loads of people every day putting posts up, oh, want to sell this legendary, want to sell this thing, and I'm seeing pretty much everyone in my Discord server anyway is saying, no, I'm not buying that. I don't have the money. I bought boxes. So that is just something to be aware of. And if you can't sit through that, then that's kind of PSA number 2. It's kind of rough right now. If you want to sell cards, be a bit flexible with how much they're going to go. Decide how much you really want the money. Like, it's not that you shouldn't cash out. We have seen Doomsday selling for 700-800 quid. We have seen, others selling for 1,000. People are buying, not in huge volumes, but they are buying. So if you want to cash out a bit now, you can do it, but be prepared that the prices are going to go down as more people get a bit more desperate to sell. You've got all the people on eBay trying to scout boxes who are being still under, like in the UK, it's ridiculous because there are people trying to sell boxes on eBay for 350 quid. A guy comes into the UK Facebook trading marketplace and says, I need to sell this for 380. You talk to him a bit and he said, well, I bought it for 320, so I have to sell it for 380 or more. And we have a store that's undercutting those people and selling at 275 because they can, and trying to drop the market down a bit. So there's a lot of complicated stuff going on with that, and I think it's just important to realize that the prices are still falling. And if you're in that situation where you have that 300 box, I'm not gonna go in like all Wall Street bets on people, but if you bought a box that for a high price and you're currently in a situation where the prices are dropping and you're worried and you don't need that money, hold on to it, right? Because it is very likely that once these boxes all finish being opened, and once the boxes drop in price, people will buy them and open them, that there will be a stabilization and a rise in price. And when that happens, you will have a good idea of what the box is actually worth at that point. At the moment, it's too all over the place. So if you can afford to wait, do. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not even a card game selling advisor. But I'm just, you can see the way these trends are going. And it's a good idea to just be a bit patient with these kind of things if you can afford to be. So, interesting. A store just said they were waiting for their second Monarch first delivery. That's interesting. Oh, okay. No, I see what's happened. It's from the EU distributor, not the UK one. So half of their allocation is actually in transit. They haven't had it arrived yet. That's good. That's good. Okay. So no, don't worry. There's not another wave of Monarch first. So what is happening next? What is our next? What is our next PSA then? So we've done a few. Wait for prices to stabilize. Don't be freaked out. Or cash out if you need to, but be a bit reasonable with what you're going to get for that. Be set your expectations. Don't buy boxes you can't afford, expecting the value to come back and give you that. The other thing is, like, just be smart with things like eBay and stuff like that. I've seen a big problem the past few days with people putting up stuff on very short bids on eBay, like 3 days, and then they're only hitting £10 before they sell, and that's a majestic foil selling for £10. I think it's important to remember that eBay doesn't necessarily get the eyes on niche products that you think it does. And, like, unless it's a very high ticket card, like a legendary or a cold foil, people aren't necessarily searching for it as much as you think they are. So, if you're selling your cold foil, your majestics and your foil majestics, put it up for a longer auction. People will probably still try and get a deal, But, you know, how much is that card really worth? Is it 10, 20, 30 pounds? No one really knows right now. There were some initial silly prices of like 50 quid paid for a single card. Is that really what they're worth? I personally don't think so. So just be aware that if you post something up on a very short auction on eBay, it may not get the eyeballs and it may sell for a price you're not happy with. But it is important to not get into bad habits on eBay, right? Because eBay as a company does punish people for repeatedly canceling auctions that sell. And they do charge you for it as well. And people can report you as a seller and things like that. So it's kind of just important to be aware of what you're going into. If you have a set price that you need to get for a card, then and you think it's viable on the market, then list it as buy it now or sell it through one of the Discord channels. If you just want something to sell and get a bit of money back out of it, then put it up for auction. But don't be afraid to put it on 7 days. People won't bid until the last day. It's just how things go. A lot of your value won't come until the last 2 minutes. Don't cancel it just because it's £10 and it's only been there. Instead, look at the watcher number for the thing and the number of views. So, for example, if you've got a card that's valued at 50 quid, but it's only going for £10, and it has zero watchers and 5 views, right? Maybe 1 bid, then okay, you've got a problem, right? And you should probably try and publicize it on Facebook or something like that. Try and get a few more people interested in it because it is currently undervalued. If you've got something that's say the same, £10, 1 bid, but maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 watchers, don't be as worried because ultimately the watchers are going to have that notification pop up before it sells, reminding them, and they're going to see the price, and they're going to be like, actually, that's really undervalued, and you'll get a lot of traction in the last few minutes. But it's just important to be aware of what you're getting into on eBay, especially if you're a new card seller, and just be aware. The best things to do is to check like sold listings on eBay. Don't just go on what's currently listed. See what people are actually paying. If it's got a green line strike through it, that means that it's a best offer accepted, which means it won't be selling for the listed price. It will have sold for less. It won't tell you what it sold for, but you can assume it's like 10, 15, 20% less, or just look at the other sold listings to get a good idea. That's kind of our eBay related PSA. Yeah. Let's move on from just like PSA news, that kind of thing. Well, no, we'll stay on the news, but we'll move away from like Turbulency and Monarch and stuff like that because it is a really good set, and I really just want to give my initial thoughts and takes kind of for the latter half of this video on Monarch as a set, on my experience playing it so far, and just on like the class design and things like that. So I've got these. These are the Monarch Blitz decks here. I picked up a set of all of them, wrong way around. Prism, Bolton. You've seen the rest. Levia, Chain. I played an event with the Chain one yesterday, a Channel Fireball event, and it was fantastic. Like, it genuinely was. I picked up these for the Rainbow Foil Hero card and the Extended Art card. I did not expect them to be well designed. I have been proven wrong. I've been burned by starter decks in too many games, so I didn't expect them to be very good. I've been proven wrong. These decks are fantastic. They're genuinely fantastic. I would recommend them at retail for anyone who's starting Flesh and Blood and likes the look of one of these characters. Best £10 you've ever spent. Right, because the thing that impressed me about them, right, is firstly, I mean, they don't waste space on generics that don't suit the class theme. There are a few specific generics, but the main thing you'll realize the difference between, say, playing sealed and playing with a deck like this is that this deck does not waste space on generics that it doesn't need. So you go from, say, a sealed pool where you might have 12 or 13 or 14 class cards to one where you have about 25, and maybe you have some other like generics, like the Chain deck has Warmonger's Recital because it works really well with Chain. And it has, what's the other one? It has, is that it? No, it just has Warmonger's Recital. But they also added in crew cards. Like, this is Consuming Volition. This is a crew Runeblade card. They've added in crew cards to the decks wherever they think they were really good. So this is actually great because you get 2 copies of a red or blue crew card that you needed. The other thing I want to talk about is that the cost curve in these decks is actually really good. Surprisingly good. So, it's got the ratios of blues to yellows to reds versus the actual cost of your cards. It's just very well done in a way that, I'll be honest, just due to other games, I didn't really expect the starter decks to do. I think that any of these is a great candidate for a new player to pick up and just start adding cards to. I think that they give you a really good idea of not only how the hero is supposed to play, but also how your deck is supposed to build in terms of pitch ratios and things like that. So actually, yeah, the starter decks are brilliant. As a existing player, I don't regret buying them for the foil cards. And then I'm already talking with a friend about just because we've got our reopening happening in a month. We're already planning on building WTR and ARC starters. But I was like, why don't we just recreate what's in these, like common for common, and just make loads of them and just give them away to people, right? As starters, because we're not going to have these in stock in my local store because they're not stocking Fab yet. We're gearing up to convince them to stock Fab, but they're not doing it yet. So I was like, yeah, we'll just do these. These are really well designed. And I'm just generally really impressed with them. So that's really good. The other thing that keeps coming back to this, I mean, it's tied to the Blitz decks, is just how good all of these heroes are, right? Like, genuinely how good all of these heroes are. Like, I was not thinking I would be a fan of Bolton. He looked fairly straightforward. But the more I play him, the more interesting his turns become in terms of, like, charging up an attack and like figuring out the best thing to get go again and how to get buffs on your cards and what the optimum path was. And it's the same with Chain. The more I play Chain, the more interesting his turns become because I find more ways of lining stuff up. And then I add in some Majestics. I've got more go again. And then each turn becomes kind of like a puzzle. So I played Kano for all the skirmish season, and one of the reasons I liked Kano was because all of his turns were like a puzzle. It's like, well, how do I combo? What do I do? And playing Chain and Bolton feels very, very similar. It's like, how do I optimize while also, not taking that much damage? So both of these are very well designed. Levia feels really interesting in terms of her additional costs and like banishing 6 strength cards. And when you have a sealed, it wasn't very good, but when you have a constructed deck with Levia and most of your deck is 6 attack cards, she feels really good. So I'm really I'm saying really a lot, but I'm really enthusiastic about these decks and also the heroes in general. I think each of them really hits the nail on the head in terms of theme, but also the abilities and the art. It all just comes together. Like, I always call, and I've said this to a few friends and they got a little bit annoyed, but for me, WTR is the boring set, right? I got bored of playing WTR sealed after 3 or 4 games. The heroes just aren't that interesting. They just attack again. They just attack some more, and they just keep attacking. They like Dorinthia attacks a couple of times a turn and buffs her attacks massively. Ira just keeps going and going and going. Katsu would be interesting, but he's not that strong. Bravo's good. Actually, I have nothing to say against Bravo. He's really strong in terms of I'm going to defend, I'm going to build up, I'm going to attack. Like, he's got really strong sort of flow and theme to him. And Guardian, I think, has a lot of room for expansion. Brute, actually, I'm fine with Brute as well. Big attacks, again, a little bit boring in terms of just, I'm going to attack you now. Oh, I rolled a 2. Okay, cool. Going to attack you again, But a bit more interesting in terms of theme and a little bit of random and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not really a fan of WTR. ARC for me was much, much more interesting. The hero design and the way things were made. You had the Ranger playing with the Arsenal more. You had Wizard playing instants. And you have Mechanologist doing all the boosting and the go again and the charging and the items and stuff on the table. And you had, I always forget this last one, Wizard, Ranger, Runeblade, of course, Runeblade, building up rune chants, all that sort of stuff. So ARC for me was when the game actually really started to sort of click and be like, well, actually, this is interesting and this is fun. I'm playing heroes that are not just about attacking, they're about attacking and attacking plus attacking and doing something else. Having another side strategy where they build a token or they build a board of items or they play at instant speed or they have ways of getting more cards in their arsenal and doing things like that. And that's where the game really started to come alive. And if that feeling was true, that progression from WTR to ARC, Monarch has just blown it out of the park, right? Monarch took everything I liked about ARC in terms of heroes not being about the base mechanics, not being about attacking again and again and again in such a straightforward way, but opening up more avenues within that space. You've got Bolton, who is about attacking multiple times a turn, but he does it by charging his soul and getting bonuses, and he has to make sure his deck has has buffs in for his attacks, and he can't attack again unless he's buffed his attacks. And if you defend a different way, it turns off his attacks. So if you don't defend, he can't get go again. There's loads of little rooms and areas for optimization and tweaking and all these other things to make Bolton just much, much more interesting than, say, Dorinthia. And then you've got Chain, who's all about attacking again and again and again. Go wide. Chain is probably going to be how he's built. But within that scope, because you're banishing cards from the top of your deck, you don't really know what your hand's going to be. There's a lot of variance, and there's a lot of making up combos as you go along, and pattern recognition, and all these other kind of things that make it a lot more interesting than just, attacking. So Chain and Bolton, they're very similar in terms of go wide, but they feel completely different. And to me, that's an unmitigated success, right? Two heroes that essentially have the same strategy, feeling completely different. It's brilliant. And I feel like I didn't really appreciate this until I sat down and actually played the pre-releases, and then until I sat down and played with these Blitz decks. I did not appreciate exactly how well each of these heroes was designed. And I think the main one I didn't appreciate was Levia, because I played Levia in a pre-release, and I had 12 cards. No, I had 13 cards that banished, and I had 14 cards that were +6 strength. Oh, sorry. Ooh. Bit late here. And I thought that was enough. It was not. And then I played this deck, and I was like, no, she starts becoming seriously consistent. Then we move on to my other initial piece of feedback about Monarch, which is just another really positive thing, right? So we've had our PSAs, we've had our what's going on with the markets. What is the other really, really positive thing? It is the equipment, right? Okay, we've got to the left of me the legendary equipment. It's fantastic, right? It is. All of those legendaries really synergize well with the class, except maybe Bolton's. Bolton's is just... It does synergize, but it's just more defense, which Warrior didn't really need, and it doesn't really match Bolton's theme, though I will say that he does tend to need to keep cards in his hand, so being able to defend consistently with a Dynamo does make sense for him. But if you... And Chain's legendary, Shadow Husk, not very good. The Eclipse is interesting as a card, and I have found some fun playing with the specializations, but I've said my piece many other times about one-ofs in decks and things like that. I'm just not a fan of them, so let's not focus too much on Eclipse. I would have liked to have seen a Shadow Runeblade legendary equipment instead. 100% every time, same for Levia. But I appreciate that those cards are seemingly cheaper because they're in decks and not as desirable for multiple classes, so... the price on those seems to be lower, so that's going to be good in the long term for new players. Because I really don't think that we want a situation where someone starts playing Monarch with Unlimited and can't afford to get Eclipse or Doomsday for Levia or Chain. I think that needs to not happen. I think they need to be able to get that card, as it seems to be a very strong build-around card for a deck. But, okay, to go back to equipments, because this is important. The quality of equipments in this set is very, very high. You've got common equipments that compete, I would say compete, they probably don't win, with legendary equipment slots from WTR and Arc, right? That's just it. So, like, if you're looking at building a deck, you can happily think about putting in Stubby Hammerers in Runeblade over Grasp of the Arknight. I know a lot of people want Grasp of the Arknight now, but Stubby Hammerers, really good card in Runeblade. Go wide, you get +1 to all of your attacks, play 3 or 4 of them, it's perfect. You can play the Warrior Bracers in Gallantry Golds instead of the legendary ones. You can play Hooves of the Shadow Beast instead of Scabskin Leathers. Someone has made a very conscious decision with this set to print common equipments that fork on, play on, and side grade the legendary equipments from previous sets. And whoever did that just gets a big thumbs up, right? You made the right decision. Because that card that costs 50p, okay, now no one's saying that, say, Hooves of the Shadow Beast is better than Scabskin Leathers. If you roll a 6 on Scabskin, you get 3 action points, and you can do it every turn. Hooves of the Shadow Beast gives you 1 action point once a game. They're not better, but in a Blitz game, in a shorter game, they're comparable, and that's important. It's important, new players coming in thinking, oh, but I've got to buy this legendary, it's 150 quid. And I can say to them, well, actually, if you're playing Blitz, you're starting off, you don't need to. You can play this common. This common costs 50p. Just play the common. It's going to give you a little bit of what the legendary has. And if you're really liking Brute, proxy the legendary a bit. If it's really good, then you can go and buy it. Okay? And that pathway of common and letting people build the decks and not feeling like they have to get a legendary it's just a vital like tick in the box for me with Monarch. I can't explain it other way. It's fantastic. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of my initial reactions. Loving the equipment, loving these Blitz decks, loving the feel of all the heroes. I think design has knocked it out of the park. They had long enough, apparently 7 years designing the set, so I'd be surprised if they hadn't. And then a few PSAs. I guess the other thing I just want to talk about is, supply. I mean, well, I don't really want to go back into that. I'm just trying to think that there was something about. No, I have lost it out of my head. This is why I should take script sometimes, but I prefer the ramble. Anyway, we've hit 35 minutes, so I'm not going to go on for much longer. As always, to anyone who has listened to me talk for this long, I really do appreciate it. Please do let me know if you like this video. Let me know if you would prefer more market talk, less market talk, more talk about design. I do have plans. I'm going to do a series on how and what I would recommend putting in these decks to make them better if you're a new player. So look out for that. And I'm just going to shuffle them now because that's just, how we go. So yeah, that's it really. Like the video, subscribe to the channel so you get notifications. If you want it on audiobook, I have that available through Anchor and a few other platforms. Just search for Steel First Speaks. And yeah, that's it really. Thanks for listening, and I will speak to you all soon.